Hi all, hope you had a good weekend. I wanted to post a short video to Blackboard today so that I can update you on a couple of quick things. First of all, I went through and I read all of your responses to each other's posts and thought that for the most part you did a pretty good job. The better ones were the ones that really looked back to the readings and the podcasts to include detailed reasons for why you were either agreeing or disagreeing with the person who you were responding to. And a few of you definitely used experience from your medical backgrounds to make a response as well, and there were some technical details that people included that were helpful, definitely. But I need you to be a little bit more conscientious, I think, overall about treating those responses as if they are independent answers to questions. In some ways, they even need more reinforcement and more reasons and evidence for responding the way that you are to your peers, because you kind of want to treat it like you're trying to convince the person that you're responding to that maybe they should think about your position. And there were a couple, not too many, but a couple that you would make a statement about what you believed or what you thought, and then just end it kind of there with no additional reinforcement. So you won't have to respond to anybody's now for another, I think until the end of this week. So try to be monitoring the discussion questions, seeing who you might want to respond to because of whatever area of interest appeals to you about a particular question that was answered. Couple of things about the Blackboard site itself. I've advanced the assignments almost to the end of the summer session now. I put in questions for chapters I think 11 and 12 and 13 and 17 I paired up together. So just pay attention as you get farther along. I may eliminate a chapter or two, not much from the textbook, but I think I skipped over chapter 10, and I'm not sure whether I'm coming back to that at a later point or not. So just look ahead a little bit, make sure that you're previewing the Blackboard page so that you know what's coming up. I also added a couple of lines to the paper assignment. One of the things that I will ask you to do for that is to make sure that you use some outside sources to support the position that you're taking. And so I think I put into that assignment that you'll need 3 additional articles, peer-reviewed scholarly articles to make reference to in your answer. And I created a folder on Blackboard on the home page, and I think I called it Controversial Topics in Bioethics. And in that folder there are different topics that you can pick from that will be a good kind of meaty issues for you to write that paper about. In addition, in the articles folder that's also on the home page, I started adding other articles that I've had in reserve. And among those articles are articles that are specifically related to the topics that you might be interested in for your argument paper. So there are some resources there if you have any questions. People really haven't so far used the Ask Professor Reynolds discussion section, and I'm taking that as a good sign because people are getting assignments done, and so I'm assuming that you're still feeling like things are going okay for you. But if questions arise, please post them there. People have emailed me individually too, and I respond to all those emails, but sometimes by posting it on the discussion, if it's a question that others might be interested in, they'll be able to read those responses also. Oh, and I also added a couple of new podcasts to the podcast folder. I'm sorry that it's a little bit after the fact, but I actually found an interview with Sherry Fink, who was the author of that article on Dr. Pao in the New York Times. I don't think I realized it, or I knew it and had forgotten that she is actually a physician herself turned journalist, and so that gives you a little bit of insight into like the technical details in that article on things. She was obviously very knowledgeable about the medical side of the disaster and the response to the disaster. So you have a link to that podcast if you're interested. I don't think she doesn't say much that is new or in much greater detail than the article itself, but sometimes it's interesting to listen to the person who was writing the material. Another podcast that is available on and that I do assign for, I think it's later this week or the beginning of next week maybe, is one called On the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is a book that when I teach this class for a whole semester that I've assigned for the semester. It's a little bit long and we're just packed too tightly for me to have assigned it this summer, but it's a book that really delves into a lot of the issues that come up in research ethics, so bioethics in the context of medical research, and a big issue of, sort of ownership of our tissue even after we're dead. So ownership of our genetic material after we're dead. And so that's one. Please listen to that one. You'll see that it's assigned now, I think, in association with chapter 9, I'm pretty sure. And it's a fairly short one, 15 or 20 minutes, but the author, Rebecca Skloot, she's a journalist who pursued this story for 8 or 9 years because the family members that were involved were very reluctant to speak to outsiders. But she finally really got the full story, and it's worth listening to. And so I just wanted to follow up briefly for a minute after having read all of your responses. A lot of people responded to the Katrina, when you were responding to other people's posts, you responded to the article about Dr. Pao and people's comments on her and that particular situation. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you all, I may have actually written this question to a couple of you, is this. Can you empathize with Dr. Pao and realize and really think that if you were in her position that you would have done the same thing, and still think that that thing was ultimately wrong? And that's a tough question because it involves hindsight. It involves, you evaluating yourself and thinking, wow, I could have actually done something that might be wrong and still have felt in the moment like it was a good idea. And I'm not trying to convince you in that direction. I don't know that she was necessarily wrong, and I don't know how I would have personally responded in that situation. But as ultimately in the end, in the final moments, the person who was kind of in charge, more or less, I would have to say, the analogy, and you can decide whether this is a legitimate analogy or not, that I made was kind of like with a captain of a ship, and the ethics of maritime law or whatever it would be, that the captain is the last person to leave and doesn't leave anybody still on the ship to go down unless he's going down with it and with them. And I think that's sort of my question, is that under those circumstances, even with all of the horrible circumstances and things, was she or was somebody morally or ethically obligated to say, I don't know if anybody's going to come to rescue these patients, but rather than sedating them to the point of death, I will stay with them and I will make them as comfortable as possible, and maybe I think a miracle has to happen at this point for us to be saved, but I'll be here if and when that miracle happens. And so I wonder, I'm of mixed mind about that, but I wonder, is that more than we can ask of somebody? I mean, is that, as much as we would like to think that somebody would be that courageous or that clear-headed or that noble, altruistic, self-sacrificing, however you want to frame it, should we expect that of anybody under those circumstances? So think about that. I don't need you to write a specific answer to that, but if this case has sort of gotten under your skin at all, you can certainly respond in the discussion forum. I always go back and I look and see if there have been any, you can see if there have been new comments or new replies, so I always look for that. Okay, shifting gears, some of you have already started to answer questions for end of the day today on chapter 4 and 5, but I just wanted to make a brief comment. The issue of abortion obviously is a loaded one in our society, and during a political season that we are approaching rapidly now and have been in during the Republican primary, abortion and other aspects of women's rights to choose and the pro-life side always come into these discussions. At the same time, though, and in a class where we get to talk face to face, when it's an in-person class, this really is important. In any group of students, you're as likely as not to have a student or students in the class who have made themselves that very personal choice to terminate a pregnancy. And for that reason, I'm always extra sensitive and always want to pass along my thoughts to the students and to emphasize how important it is to deal with this issue respectfully, empathically. And again, this is an issue that we can disagree about, that we can argue about, but no matter what your personal perspective is, whatever your religious philosophy is, whatever your anti-religious perspective is, when it comes down to it, for us as professionals, whether it's medical professionals, social work professionals, ultimately our responsibility becomes to help people make decisions that are the best decisions for them, for their families, for their health, of course, and to be respectful of each other when we express our opinions about these topics, so that we're not engaging in the act of judging people or individuals for who they are. We may disagree with their ideas, their decisions, but we have to be very careful about making statements or comments that appear to, or that by design, characterize or put people in a box as you are a whatever. I teach a class in race, ethnicity, and diversity is the title of it, and a lot of times the discussions in that kind of class, for obvious reasons, become very heated and very intense also. But as soon as somebody makes a statement that other people are going to characterize as racist or prejudiced or bigoted or whatever the case is, we have to deal with that statement, where it comes from, how it is being evaluated. But if we place the label of racist on the individual who made the statement for whatever reasons, we've kind of cut off the opportunity for discussion. Because now we put them, you are this thing, and if you are this thing, we may believe that you're not going to change, or that you're a bad person, or whatever the case is. And so, in a lot of ways, it's even more intense with the abortion issue because of people's perspectives on what is a human life, what's a person, when does somebody become a person, all those kind of things. And if, for personal reasons, for religious reasons, if, for example, you believe that life begins at conception, you may then put the label of, you know, killer, murderer, whatever, on somebody who has made a decision to terminate a pregnancy. We can't do that in this class. And so if that's hard for you, or if you can't engage this subject matter without placing that level of criticism or judgment on other individuals, then, you know, answer the questions, respond to people's posts from different questions, and because we're not in a class where I can manage this conversation by talking to people directly and individually. And so when posts come, and, you know, it's like social media and things like that, and, you know, cyberbullying and that kind of thing. Schools try to regulate it, but there's nothing they can do about it, really. And this is one of those topics where I would ask you all to be respectful enough of each other, not to avoid saying something that people might disagree with, but to avoid commenting in a direct way about people's decisions or choices, such that people in our class might feel as if this has been personalized in some way. So I don't expect, based on the responses that I've gotten from you all so far on the questions and things, I don't really expect that. But again, abortion is always a loaded issue, and I don't want to make any assumptions that simply because a lot of you are medical professionals or anything else that you have more pro-choice views on this issue. So I hope I'm clear and direct about that. I don't think that we should have any topics in this class that are off limits, but once again, this is a topic that if you choose to answer questions or respond to other questions, you should be looking to demonstrate evidence, reasons, moral principles, ethical principles from bioethics to defend the choices and the responses that you would make. And so just from an ethical perspective, if you haven't already done the reading or haven't already posted your questions, a couple of these main issues related to this topic are the issue of viability, and this is when we can reasonably believe that if removed from from the uterus, if removed from the womb, the fetus will survive on its own. We can say that that should be fairly clear cut, but at the same time, then you could ask the question, well, survive for how long? Most fetuses, when removed, even very near term, that haven't been gestating for too long, are going to survive for some period of time. Does that indicate viability? We have this issue of personhood. If a fetus is not a person, does it deserve what we call, right to life? And how do we determine who or what is a person? And some of the ways of characterizing or determining that were mentioned in your text had to do with a cognitive criterion. And you should be able to look to your text to get some details about what the cognitive criterion might be. To look at a gradient view, meaning that personhood is not either or, yes or no, but we can have personhood exist along a continuum. And then this notion of potentiality. That an argument can be made that what's wrong with killing a fetus is the same thing that's wrong with killing an adult, that we're depriving the fetus of the potential for cognitive and emotional and other experiences. So these are some of the major ethical issues that you'll have to confront when you look at this chapter, and hopefully you'll bring some of that material, some of that content into your discussion when you're answering the questions. I'm going to try to post this short talk to the Blackboard page. If it's maybe a function of size, that I don't have enough space on the page, enough bandwidth or whatever they call it, to store all these. But if that's the case, it takes a little while to upload to YouTube, and I will upload it. So I'm going to end this now. If you hear that beeping, that's my meatloaf finishing. So I've been doing a little cooking while I'm talking to you, so I have to get up anyway to turn that annoying beep off. So I hope you all had a good weekend. I hope you're hanging in there. Remember, post to the Ask Professor Reynolds discussion if you have any other issues. Email me individually if there's other stuff. And I'm looking forward to reading your posts and your response to the questions for the next couple chapters. This will be up soon, I hope. Take care.